Today I'm here in my ocean shrine, and I want to talk about the most beautiful and heartfelt science textbook that I've ever seen. And to do that, I have to talk about some other books. And I don't know why this video is so hard to make. This one's really close to my heart. When I was young, I read John Steinbeck's Cannery Row, which I still think is probably the best thing he ever wrote, about just a bunch of guys hanging out in a small California town. And there's this character, Doc, who was amazing. He was a self-made scientist who knew the California seashore better than anyone else, and to make his living would make up experiment kits for school classrooms across the country and send those out to people. But he loved hanging out with these bums and talking about poetry and philosophy. He loved drinking. He loved the ladies. He just loved life. And I found out later that this was a real person. His name was Ed Ricketts, and he was a great friend of John Steinbeck. And you see this Ed Ricketts Doc character keep coming up over and over again. By the way, this is a great article in Nature that also talks about Ed Ricketts that you can see online. And so they became really good friends. And they actually wrote a book together called The Log of the Sea of Cortez, because they went down to the Sea of Cortez together and documented what they saw. And it was a weird book that flopped because it was a mixture of scientific observations and philosophy and John Steinbeck's take on life mixed in with Ricketts' take on life. And it's a really, really cool book. And so then years later, as I'm writing my endocannabinoid graphic novels based on Moby Dick, I need to learn more about the ocean, because that's my metaphor for the human brain and how complex and mysterious all the life that is there. And so I finally get Ed Ricketts' book, Between Pacific Tides, which apparently, if you're a marine biologist, you know exactly where this is on your shelf. And it is dog-eared and beat up because it's such a classic tome in the field. That's because, as Ricketts said, this California intertidal zone might be the most rich, prolific place of life on the entire planet. And he just spent his entire life screwing around with it, observing it. And so this book that he wrote isn't just a catalog of the life that lived there. He also wove in what he thought about life. And I'm still only like 2/3 of the way reading it because I don't want to finish it. I read some pages sometimes just to get more of him into my system, and I have so many notes on this. And so he says some really interesting things in the intro as well. He talks about how the greatest human excitement is observation to speculation to hypothesis. And he was one of those gatherers of facts like Darwin. And he said how that is a great creative process. He also had something like a Sermon on the Mount in here for scientists. And he said, every eye must go to a peephole and fish out some new beauty or some new pattern. And the last thing I'll share, someone said about him, the things that mattered to him were music, literature, cars, women, and his beard. And he wanted all of those to be the finest quality. And there are stories of him in his really nice cars, but looking like a bum in old clothing, getting pulled over because nobody would believe that someone dressed like this would be driving a car like that. But for the things he cared about, he cared about them all the way. And he lived that out in his life. And so if you care about not only ocean life, if you care about the process of science and observation and observing the world and learning about it, this Between Pacific Tides is such a gem of a book.